Hi, welcome to the MacIver Report. I'm Bill Osmulski, Content Director for the MacIver Institute. It is February 28th, 2025. I am joined, as always, by my colleague,
Mike Lucas, Policy Analyst, Chief Economist.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here again on this Friday afternoon. For some reason, everyone else is always clearing out on Fridays, and we decide, hey, this is the perfect day for us to come into the office and do our podcast. But, part of the idea behind that is it's fresh. So, people are heading into your weekend, and you'll get some fresh content here to go through. And we're going to, as always, go through our top stories for the week. So we're going to start off, and we really didn't cover this too much, but this is pretty much the biggest story in the Capitol this week was the ROFR committee hearing, public hearing on March 4th. That was Tuesday. And this was a huge, this is a really hot issue in the Capitol right now. If you listen to talk radio, you've been hearing all about it. The question, this bill, ROFR, would establish essentially a monopoly for transmission companies that are based in Wisconsin. It essentially would block out any transmission companies from out of state from ever bidding on projects in Wisconsin. A lot of emotions. Republicans are pretty split on this issue. For the MacIver Institute, this just goes into our core values. Not really staking out a position on this because this is a big a lot of money is being thrown on the Capitol. But for us, we're a free market think tank, and as a free market think tank, we are opposed to any attempt by government to establish a monopoly in the private sector. And so to keep rather than get into the weeds on this, I just wanted to play one little clip of an exchange from that hearing. So
to summarize our position overall, eliminating competition raises costs. We believe this bill will remove competitive bidding for large regional transmission lines. This will likely increase costs for ratepayers by removing cost controls. Competitive bidding lowers capital costs, lowers the return on equity, can achieve alternative financing. We'll get into more alternative financing in a little bit. Competitive bidding creates accountability.
Let me enter. So just so I'm clear, is your association here to be an advocate for laissez, faire, Adam Smith, capitalism, competition, bidding, or is it, hey, you're costing us more money?
Well, number one is the cost.
But it's the cost, right?
Principally,
at the end of the day, it's what is going
to
to cost your members more money.
All right, so interesting. You don't get to hear it thrown out and open at public hearings very often about free market economics, Adam Smith, the value of competition. So obviously, as a free market think tank, we believe that competition is a good thing. We agree with Todd Stewart, who says competition lowers costs, increases accountability, the whole bit. So. Not quite sure if the chair of the committee was, saying, if he was arguing that Todd was more interested, that Todd's, ultimate purpose was because this is going to lower electricity costs, which competition, principles of competition, free market is competition will lower costs. So that would be the position. Or if he was trying to claim that or if the chair was trying to claim that competition would increase costs, and therefore this lobbyist was so principled that he was promoting free market economics at the expense of his clients. So, what was your take? Which one do you think it was?
So the chairman, I think the point he was trying to make, or what he was trying to pin Todd as, is just an ideologue, right? Ignoring cost savings that would come from a ROFR law, at not the expense of, but because of his free market principles.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Free market principles aren't just like articles of faith that come out of nowhere. They're ultimately, founded on all of economic science And for hundreds of years, since at least Adam Smith and 100 years before, economic science has shown that competition is beneficial for consumers and lowers costs, and that it maximizes human welfare. And we show this in hundreds of pages of theory, right? Sometimes, people can show it in a page or a paragraph or a sentence. It doesn't require any, fancy, statistical modeling or anything like it. It is intuition, because economics is ultimately the study of human action. It's about understanding how human beings behave, how they respond to incentives, what their interests are, and what the results of people acting on those interests are. And we know this a priori. We don't need empirical evidence. Economics, social life is so complicated. There are so many things going on at the exact same time. We don't have the privilege or even the possibility to construct, a laboratory experiment where we can isolate individual, factors from one another and do, a randomized trial like we can do in medicine or in chemistry or in physics. We're talking about millions and millions of confounders occurring all at the same time. And to get around this, the method is, okay, we need to think through this logically. Economics is closer to mathematics than it is to, the empirical experimental sciences like in applied physics or applied chemistry. Ultimately, physics and chemistry are, pure physics and chemistry are theoretical subjects as well. Think of relativity from Einstein. Einstein came up with a theory, that was founded on a certain number of assumptions, and he thought through the implications of that, and he presented this to the worldwide physics community, and they said, that makes sense. We all agree that this is true now. He had no evidence for it whatsoever. And only, 100 years later do we have the technology that allows us to actually confirm the theory, right? We're able to detect gravitational waves and,
And we still haven't disproven them, and all he did was think through the problem.
All he did was think through it. That is exactly what economics does. You think through the problem. So I find it appalling and insulting to us at MacIver, just me personally, that, free market laissez-faire principles are being, chalked up as just, blind faith demagoguery.
Well, so first of all, I find it. I'm completely amused by the idea that a lobbyist would be, more motivated by
principle than representing
their clients. Yeah, that would be
doesn't make any sense.
No, it really doesn't.
And we know this from economics too. Yeah. What are the incentives of these businesses that Todd is representing? They're interested in lowering their costs and increasing their revenues. Yeah. That's number one. If that's not their interest, then they do not exist. Mm-hmm. Then they go out of business. If free market principles, don't result, or free market principles applied in the economy, if they don't result in that lowering costs, increasing revenues, then these businesses wouldn't be around.
So another thing that you were talking about with just like all the different factors involved with the trouble with economic principle is, you can think it through logically. You can find anecdotes along the way, but it's hard to find like the totality of raw data to plug into any formula that's going to definitively prove, a policy's impacts.
Right. Yeah.
And that is a challenge that we have at MacIver. And I was thinking about Act 10 savings. Mm-hmm. This is, 14 years ago. What essentially happened was the Republicans in the legislature and Governor Scott Walker applied free market philosophy to how governments are able, local governments throughout the states and the state are able to do business, where they could actually go and seek out lower costs, more efficiencies. It was about giving them flexibility and tools to lower costs. So every year, when we calculate, okay, this is what the savings were, we're looking at like a narrow piece of that legislation. So, I mean, I can look and add up all the money that state and local employees have had to pitch into the state pension fund that they didn't have to before. So then I get a big number from that. And I can go through for a lot of government, and not all of it. I can go through and I can see, okay, this is how much they were paying for health insurance before. This is what they were paying for it now. This is what employees pitched in before, which was nothing, and this is how much they pitched in now. So I'm able to take all that data and generate a number of what our savings have been over the past 14 years through Act 10, and adding it to the trajectory that the city of Milwaukee has applied to its reasoning. We got $31 billion. There's part of me that thinks that that's a really low estimate.
Yeah.
Because I'm only looking at a piece of the puzzle, and there were other things along with that local governments are able to do. And there are 3,000 units of local government in Wisconsin. So, you look at, say some county government that all of a sudden, it has to find somebody to do overtime at the county jail. They can actually, and the youngest guy on staff wants to do it and the oldest guy on staff wants to do it. And you say, well, young guy, go do it. You've got a family. That's a cost savings.
Yeah.
That didn't get recorded anywhere. It wasn't, there was no government document where it's every time you make a decision that was because of Act 10, you got to mark it down and report it. So all of those decisions, those millions of decisions, spread out across 3,000 units of government over the past 14 years, there is no way to calculate that.
Yeah.
And so the best we've got is anecdotes from, for the year after Act 10 was passed, Governor Walker routinely would bring in county officials, local officials saying, hey, the contracts were making us do this before, now we can do this instead, and that saved us X amount of dollars. Obviously that was never cataloged, but those episodes were happening all the time. So to me, that's just a great, example of how, economics and free market economics, how it plays out in the real world and how it's not always easy to capture or document.
Yeah, there are unobservables. I mean, there are the things that simply cannot be measured, and things that aren't recorded. Like, a lot of projects we do, we have a hypothesis, and we have an idea of the data that we want in order to assess this hypothesis, and no one else, apparently it has occurred to no one else that having data on this subject or that would pertain to this question would be useful, right? A lot of times it just doesn't occur.
It is amazing. I mean, like the amount of data that the government collects at the local, state, and federal level. You would think they would have numbers on everything. It is shocking what they don't collect data on.
Yeah.
And really useful things too, but
really useful things. I'm experiencing that right now, doing this budget analysis of the Department of Workforce Development. Yeah, they don't have data on something that is like absolutely essential.
When I was after Act 10 passed and we had those riots going on, I wanted to know how many state employees had called in sick during the protests versus how many routinely called in sick. Mm-hmm. And I found out that the state government does not keep track of that.
Which is so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, what kind of organization, human resources department at any company or organization can't tell you how many sick days people had.
Right, and when they took them. It's like, PTO, you don't keep record of that?
So I mean, like, there's part of me that gets a little paranoid at all the information government's collecting from us, but then there's another part of me where it's like, they don't really maintain it anywhere. They can't access it. So
yeah.
All right. So moving on, state budget. Continuing our state budget coverage. After we did the podcast last week, I released the DHS health services analysis. So the reason why DHS is important. So the first one we did was shared revenue. Shared revenue is all the money that the state gives your local government so your local governments don't raise your property taxes. That's what shared revenue is in a nutshell. The next one was Department of Public Instruction, because when it comes to state sources of funding, DPI gets the most out of the state budget. So state sources of funding, that's called general purpose revenue, GPR. That is your income taxes, your state sales taxes, and your excise taxes. So every time you buy a beer or a pack of cigarettes, that is going into the state's general fund. Now, whereas DPI spends the most GPR, DHS spends the most money overall. And that's because it gets so much federal money into to run its programs. The biggest program that DHS is in charge of is Badger Care. That's Medicaid. Every state, so real quick, Medicare is for retirees. That's run by the federal government. Medicaid is for poor people. It is run by the states.
Yep.
And every state gives their Medicaid program a cutesy name. So here in Wisconsin, it's called Badger Care. So Governor Evers wants to kind of do a little finagling with his budget this year for DHS. He always wants to do this, but so the current budget, we are spending $33.5 billion, all funds, that includes the federal money, on DHS. Governor Evers wants to up that $9 billion. The reason why he wants to up that $9 billion is he wants to capture all kinds of extra federal aid for doing something they want him to do, which would not be in the best interest of the state in the long run, but he still wants to do it because in the short term it means more money, and it would also free up general purpose revenue for other things he wants to do with that.
Yeah.
So what Governor Evers wants to do, and this has been a topic since Obamacare, right now, to qualify for Medicaid as a adult who, no children, you're just an adult, working age adult. You can only qualify if you make up to 100% of the federal poverty line. When Obamacare went into effect, the idea was that every state would increase that eligibility to 138% of poverty. Doesn't seem like, a huge difference, but that would be another 98,000 people in Wisconsin that would be qualified then for Medicaid, working age adults with no kids. In exchange for doing that, the federal government at the time promised that forever we will give you 90% of the additional cost by expanding it, which is and ordinarily with the Medicaid benefits, there's a split between the federal and the state for that actual benefit. So 90% is really good. So Democrats ever since then have been, first of all, they want to get as many people on government assistance as possible, so that's awesome for them. And then you get the Washington will give you more money on top of that. So, win-win as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, sweet.
Republicans have always said, look, the federal government's going broke. They are not going to be able to honor this commitment, forever. And we know from experience that as soon as you give a benefit to any group, you can never take that benefit away. You can never roll back eligibility on Medicaid. It's just never going to happen. Where the line is right now, they want to hold it there. And so now, after COVID, the federal government decided under Joe Biden decided they were going to give this another kicker. So, all right, not only will we pay 90% of this expansion forever, but for the next 2 years, the federal government will pick up 50% of all of your Medicaid costs. So now the pressure is really on the legislature to accept this expansion because all that money, all this, all of this,
Yeah.
So that's why that's kind of one of the big issues that Evers has got. So one of the insane aspects of this is while Evers is arguing that all this, the federal government wants to give us all this money, so we got to take it. So let's expand Medicaid. On the other hand, he is accusing the Republicans and President Trump of trying to gut Medicaid.
Yeah.
So you want this free and easy money at the same time that you're claiming that free and easy money isn't going to exist. So it's an interesting debate. All right, one of the other programs that DHS does that's not really high visibility, or it's high visibility. It doesn't really cost a ton. This is like $1 billion a year program, $2 billion maybe. It's food share. Now, the federal government completely pays for food share. I talk about it a little bit in the analysis, and just to show you like how the how many people are on food share. Look, there's 6 million people in the state of Wisconsin, so we're just under 1/6 of the population's on food share.
Yeah.
That's not great, but when you look at Milwaukee County and you're talking about food assistance, and you're talking about medical assistance, a third of the people who live in Milwaukee County are on food assistance, and a quarter of them are on Badger Care. I mean, that is a real indictment of that Milwaukee economy.
Yeah.
So with all of these analyses, we're using this as an opportunity to really stake out our policy positions on all of these issues. So for years, MacIver, we're a free market think tank. We are committed to those values. We're purists. We don't have to run for re-election. So we can hold the pure position because the idea is when you come to the MacIver Institute for information or just, a direction, you will get the free market answer to your question. It might not be the answer you want to hear, but we aren't in the business of that. We are here to be a free market think tank, a pure free market think tank. So when it comes to DHS and welfare and all that, we believe in freedom, independence, and self-reliance. Those are core American values. And no one can embody those values if they need to be dependent on the government to provide their basic needs. Government assistance should be the option of last resort for everyone. People should not be encouraged to participate in welfare programs when they have other options, especially when those other options include productive employment. Restricting eligibility and establishing requirements that encourage participants to disenroll as soon as they're back on their feet is the way to go.
Yep.
So,
reminding me of what Ronald Reagan said about the government dole. We should, measure our success not by the number of people, on welfare, but the number of people who are off.
Yeah, and that's a good quote. I've also heard, some politicians say these programs are meant to be a safety net, not a hammock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the benefits you get, if you're, someone who receives welfare, you can double dip. You can get benefits from the feds, and you can get it from the state.
Yeah.
But a lot of work has been done on this. I mean, the total value of compensation you can get from federal and state welfare is like over $100,000.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've seen studies.
$100,000.
Like when they're talking about these migrants, and like how much they cost. When they're on public benefits, it's like over $1 million a person. So it's
yeah.
And but that's supporting the whole ecosystem. But yeah, like in terms of like the actual benefit that the person receives, I mean, it's once you get on them, there's a reason why it's hard to get off of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not even we haven't addressed it here because I was just talking about food share and Medicaid. But one of the things we talked about before is housing programs and cost of housing and
really expensive.
And one of the cost drivers of that is federal assistance. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, they have renters assistance programs where they set the rents that they will reimburse landlords for by metropolitan area.
Yeah.
And here in Madison, it's like for a one-bedroom apartment, it's something like $1,200 a month. So first of all, that's an insane benefit. That's a ton of. You add that up with your Medicaid and your food share, and it's suddenly working a real job doesn't make any sense. You'd have to work for years before you'd ever overcome the benefits that you lost.
Yeah.
But the other thing is too, it drives up the housing costs for everyone else. Because if you're a landlord, you'd be nuts to set your rent at anything below $1,200 a month, where the federal government has it guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we're going to apply some laissez-faire, Adam Smithian, free market demagoguery to this situation, what would MacIver say? MacIver says the following, right? Here's our welfare policy. For some people, that's maybe not good enough because that's too principled and they want the hard facts. Here's a fact. When you socialize welfare, when you socialize charity, and you have the state take care of it, they skim some money off the top. I'm doing an analysis of the Department of Workforce Development right now. Only 30% of the money that they collect goes towards aid. The other 70% is administrative overhead costs. Three out of every $10 is going to actually helping someone. Do you think Salvation Army can afford to do that? Or do you think, your church's soup kitchen has, that kind of margin, that kind of...
So I've got a friend that would describe this as, no, it's all going to welfare. 30% for the actual welfare and the rest for middle class welfare, which is the government employees.
Actually, yes, that's another thing too. These government assistance programs aren't just assistance programs for the people who enroll. They are assistance programs for the employees.
Exactly.
Direct government assistance, government jobs is, government employment is the largest and most significant form of welfare available to anyone.
All right. Staying on the health topic, one of Governor Evers' big things has been replacing all the damn lead pipes in this state.
Yeah.
And this has been a talking point his entire administration. Starting in 2019, when he first took office, he declared it the year of safe drinking water. He pointed out that Wisconsin had 176,000 lead pipelines in the state, and it would cost around $2 billion to replace them all. And that was one of his top priorities way back, 6 years ago now. So in 2020, guess what? He got a miracle happened, COVID.
Yes.
And
greatest thing that could have ever happened for Mr. Evers.
Because he got $9 billion in federal aid with no oversight. He could spend that on pretty much anything he wants. And one of the key things that the federal government recommended that be spent on would be things like safe drinking water infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So, hey, you got $9 billion, cost $2 billion to fix these lead pipes. Let's do it. As far as we can tell, none of the ARPA money went towards lead pipes. But, there were other grant programs that came up after that. So in 2022, he allocated a little over $700 million for safe drinking water. Not necessarily lead pipe replacement, though. And so as of 2024, the most recent numbers we have, there were still 150,000 lead pipelines in Wisconsin. So, and, again, this budget, yet again, it is one of Governor Evers' top talking points is we need to replace those lead pipelines.
Yep. Typical, this is like standard, public choice theory, game theory, whatever. A politician has no incentive to solve the problems they promise to solve.
Oh, yeah, because
you got to get something to get reelected on.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of traction on this. Good for him, right?
And two things can be, gleaned from this, which is, first of all, he didn't do anything to replace lead pipes. Second of all, even assuming that the entirety of that $700 million went towards replacing lead pipes, it's going to cost way more than $2 billion to replace all the lead pipes in the state.
Well, especially after 6 years.
And now prices are up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right, next we got the Marquette Law School Poll. We had a couple stories on our website this week about the Marquette Law School Poll. The Supreme Court race is kind of neck and neck, but here was one that jumped out at us was public schools. 58% of Wisconsinites that responded to this poll are satisfied or very satisfied with their public schools, and 41% are very dissatisfied. Now, when it comes to, should we raise property taxes? No. 58% say lower the property taxes, and 41% say more money for schools. So this actually kind of lines up. It's like, no, the public schools are great. I don't keep my property taxes low. No, the public schools are horrible. We need higher property taxes. I threw in here the bottom statistic that shows, in reality, school referendums have a 78% success rate in Wisconsin. So either the Marquette Law School poll is lacking in its accuracy, or the people that really care about lower property taxes don't vote. I don't know. There's lots of theories. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe people are fine with like the school district's property tax increasing, but want their overall property tax to decrease.
Yeah.
Could be all of it, right? The Marquette Law School Poll could be off, and these people don't really understand, or they don't really believe what they say they believe.
And I think there's a coincidence that it was 58-41 for both of them. I think that's just, there's a lot of crossover. There's probably a lot of people that are very dissatisfied with the quality of public schools, but they are also in that 58% that want lower property taxes. So.
Yeah, and I just received, something from my school district, because their referendum failed, last time, and so they're bringing it up again because they're entitled to bring it up again.
Until it passes, and then it's a done deal.
Yeah.
no backsies.
But yeah, maybe this is how people feel, and then they get these flyers in the mail from their school districts, and the school districts are crying that the district's on fire and they're on the verge of bankruptcy and will have to be dissolved, and they had to lay off dozens of teachers and all sorts of stuff like this, and kids aren't getting proper attention and care in their schools, and so the whole thing is up in flames, and people get rattled, and then they vote yes, right? Because the school district wouldn't lie.
So So I'm pulling up a story here real quick that I did a while ago, but this should help people.
Is it how to fact check your school district?
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah,
so
that's a great article. We're gonna have to boost that one again.
Well, and part of the thing. All right, I'm just gonna pull this over to the other screen.
But yeah, polls. I don't even know what to make of polls. I'd like to do a poll that asks people, have you ever been polled?
Yeah. All right.
Because
yeah.
Who's responding to these?
All right.
How many?
So here's a story. Encourage everybody that's got a school referendum to go to this page. This really walks you through. It gives you a lot of resources for how you can check things, that your school district's claiming. How much revenue does your school district actually get? This is a fun one because I think this is on your literature that you got. Our revenue limit per student is here, and all the districts around us have a revenue limit that's here.
Yes.
So you need to increase your property taxes so that you could get a revenue limit up to equal with them.
Yep.
They leave a lot out of that equation. Your revenue limit is only general school aids and property tax. That is it. So the 4 dozen categorical aid programs out there that the state gives on top of this, like per pupil aid's the biggest one, that is on top of that. They get tons of money in addition to revenue limits. Another important thing to point out here is federal aid is categorical aid. So, all the fear mongering that, the Department of Public Education might go away, will not affect your property taxes at all. That is not part of the revenue limit formula. So, in a sense, it is irrelevant to your school district because all they ever want to talk about is the revenue limits.
Yeah.
So let's see. What revenue should you count? So walk you through. These are links to the actual websites on Department of Public Instruction, so you can see a lot of this stuff. Actually, check your district's math because they'll lie. I mean, look, it doesn't matter if the number's set in stone; they'll still lie to you about it. How much state aid are you actually getting? COVID aid. How much COVID aid did you get? How much are your teachers making? This is always a popular one. People like to look up salaries, so this is where you can find that information. So,
yeah, that's great. Let me just show you, or tell you some of the things that Burlington Area School District is claiming. So, good to know. Teachers did not get a raise last year, and staff was reduced by 39 positions. All right, first part, teachers did not get a raise. We can check that. We can check their salaries. And what do they mean by raise? Did they get a raise above the school district pay schedule?
Yeah,
right?
that's a fun one.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so in a lot of government jobs, there is a table that tells you, what every position should make given on how many years they've been in that position. So if you're let's say you're a first year teacher, you get 30,000. Second year, you make 33, 35. So every year you get an increase.
Yeah, guaranteed.
But when they talk about we didn't get a raise, they are talking about that. That's a step increase. That's that's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
The raise is when you get the 3% on top of that, where you increase
Right.
all the numbers in the table.
Yeah. And then the second part of that, staff was reduced by 39 positions. What are most people going to think when they read that? They're going to think faculty.
No, they're going to think teachers.
They're going to think, teachers, faculty.
Yeah.
But this says staff. Okay, that's your janitor. Those are your sports team coaches. Those are your office workers, right? People in administration. Anyone who's part-time.
Yeah.
Right. Those are all staff. I mean,
So I mean, a school district, the government will say anything to get you to pass the referendum. School districts, I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, I look at these financial records. I mean, I've gotten really good at reading budgets and figuring this stuff out. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever seen a school district that was actually broke according to their budgets or audits or anything.
yeah.
The big one right now is School District of Mauston. They just passed a referendum after their third try because the district was swearing that they were, in 4 years they were going to be completely broke and they were going to have to dissolve the district. They'd be out of business. I looked at their audits and their budgets. I looked at it from a half dozen different angles. I could not figure out where they thought that they were going broke. I mean, everywhere I looked, they were flush with cash. Like a growing budget surplus every year.
Yeah.
With cash on hand, 2.5 times more than they needed to pay their bills. Just nothing that they were saying was matching up to any of their documentation. But that's how all these school districts are.
Yeah, and it's really rich that looking at the flyers that these schools send. Like one of the other complaints on the flyer that I received was staff health care deductibles are $8,000 per family, similar to the private sector. Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good to me.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
Why should you be subsidized?
Yeah.
You're already getting money via coercion and taxation.
Mm-hmm.
You have no accountability. You can do whatever you want. You get revenue no matter what. And you're complaining that your employees aren't better off than private citizens.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. You're in trouble where you're at because these smaller cities throughout the states, more often than not, the largest employer in town is the public school system.
Yeah.
So when the school board and the superintendent tells all the employees, if this thing passes, you're getting a raise. All those employees, all their family members, all their spouses, they're all voting for this damn thing. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you might be successful, you might survive one referendum, maybe two, but they're going to get that thing through because they've convinced all their employees that they'll get a raise as soon as this thing passes.
Yeah. And here's some more trickery. Sorry, last thing I'll say.
All right.
They are talking about how they need this referendum because their revenues are going down. And then they show a bar chart, where the bars are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, throughout the years. As time goes on, that bar is going down. And what this is actually showing is an increase in the rate of tax growth. So the rate of tax growth was 11%, and then the rate of tax growth was 10% and 9%. Yeah. So they're showing you what is actually year over year changes in their revenues.
Yeah.
And then, they top it off with a complaint about how home prices have skyrocketed, but, our tax revenue hasn't increased proportionately. It's like, I'm sorry that you guys feel like you're doing really poorly and your teachers aren't being paid as much as they want, but everyone in the United States who works in the private sector is 3% poorer than they were 4 years ago. It's people in the public sector who are better off than they were 4 years ago, not everyone else. So sorry you have to live as the rest of us do, which is with a reduced standard of living. It doesn't feel very good, does it? So why don't you knock it off? I mean, you're complaining that your cartel isn't able to capture as much revenue as you want it to, or as it usually does.
Well, and those home prices, I mean, look, people are trapped in their homes right now.
Oh yeah.
You can't move. So it's like,
Your home might be worth a lot of money,
Yeah.
but if you sell it, where are you going to move?
So you cannot control your home value going up.
Right.
And so your property tax bill, it's still growing. Even without these referendums, your property tax bill is still going up.
Yeah.
And they're complaining that, but they'll show you that in proportion to your home value, it should be, they believe that your property tax bill should be growing as your home value grows. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
So what they show you is, the mill rate is just plummeting.
Yep.
Your bill is staying the same. Your bill is going up even though your mill rate is going down.
Yeah.
So it's like, not only is everybody living with less, making do with less, but they want to add to that pain.
Yeah.
All right, just one more thing on the Marquette Law School poll. This was their accuracy in October, where they had Donald Trump 2 points behind Harris. This was their last poll before the election. So just a reminder to always take these things with a grain of salt. And for our final free market discussion this week, I found this video on Twitter. We retweeted it. We're going to play this and brief discussion.
So we're going to take a guess. Who can guess within the last 3 years how much I have had to pay payroll taxes to just be able to pay you guys, which are all worth it, but this is a government issue. How much do you think I've paid in payroll taxes? It's just a tax that I pay to pay you guys, if that makes sense.
In 3 years.
In the last 3 years.
Oh, 3 years.
In the last 3
I'm
years.
gonna say 60,000. I think 80,000.
I said 100,000.
I'm gonna go 85. Like 90.
Okay. You want to weigh in, Liana? How much you think in the last 3 years I've had to pay in payroll taxes?
45,000.
Okay. Are you all ready?
Yeah.
Drum roll.
Really high.
You want to guess? 1,000? $272,000 to the U.S. government just to pay people that you will also pay your taxes on as well. And then when you go to buy something,
Why are
you
you
will
doing
also
this?
be taxed on the
so
item
sorry.
that
Why are
you
you
are
here?
purchasing.
I feel awful.
No, don't go. No, it's
I'm gonna
you're
go.
also, and then you get paid, and then your paycheck's half of that because you're also paying taxes. And then when you go to purchase something,
you pay-
you will be paying taxes.
And we pay for the same thing.
The U.S. dollar is taxed 1 million times before it even ends up in someone's name. So
We used to go to war for taxing.
no
Now I get
taxation
it.
without
Oh my
representation.
gosh. I could buy a house with that.
Yep, me too.
No wonder.
Anyways,
Federal taxing.
love you all.
God.
All right, Mike.
The one gal is correct. We used to go to war over taxes.
Well, this is a great video for us to find this week because you're going through DWD and that's payroll
Yeah.
taxes paid to the federal government comes back to Wisconsin to
Yeah,
fund
for-
unemployment, and 30% of that goes to.
Yep. Yeah. Payroll taxes levied for the unemployment insurance program, which is the feds require, but it's administered by the states, and 70% of that goes to just running the website and paying for the building and salaries and fringe benefits for the employees who work there, and only 30% actually goes to people who try to collect unemployment. Ridiculous.
So if you're the type that enjoys those types of videos, come to MacIverInstitute.com to get the stories that go along with them, especially during our budget coverage.
Oh, yeah.
So, all right. That's all for this week. As always, another busy week. Couldn't even get to everything. So be sure to check out our website, MacIverInstitute.com, for all of the stories we talked about today and all the stories we didn't talk about. And until next week, we'll catch you again next week. And until then, have a great weekend and enjoy your next week.